The Cold Calling. Arrival in the northern reaches. The cold pierced to the bone like slender needles. Andrew Harper's weathered pickup truck, he a photographer and wanderer by trade, groaned and rattled along the ice-glazed gravel road. He drove northward, ostensibly for the photographing of ancient lighthouses. But in truth, he fled from the past, from memories that gnawed at his mind, seeking to tear it asunder from that which he should never have done. The small fishing village on the Alaskan Gulf appeared as a lost island of human presence in the icy wilderness. Frozen docks, rusted nets hanging like skeletons, and the perpetual stench of rotting fish pervaded the air. Late autumn held sway. The polar night drew near, and each breath cut into the lungs with cold. Andrew had planned to tarry but a day or two, to wait out the first winter storms and move on. But the tempest came suddenly and with savage fury. The ocean roared as though something immense scraped beneath the waters. The wind howled, bringing with it a thick, impenetrable fog that shrouded the solitary lighthouses. Departure from the village became impossible. One could only wait until the weather loosened its frigid bonds. He rented a room from the local shopkeeper, Lydia Ross, widow of a fisherman who had vanished without trace 2 years prior. Lydia, a woman of perhaps 40 years, was quiet and somewhat distant, yet caring. Her 8-year-old son, Jacob, immediately showed a keen interest in Andrew. Over dinner, accompanied by the howling wind beyond the window, Jacob, who typically sat with his nose buried in his plate, suddenly raised his eyes to Andrew. "My papa heard the breathing beneath the waters," he whispered, and in his voice was no childish naivete, only terrible earnestness. He heard voices, and then he disappeared. Lydia immediately chided her son, casting him a stern look. She did not believe in such legends, but Jacob, an impressionable child, listened to them with rapture. "They are merely old tales, Jacob," Lydia said dryly. But Jacob's words had already taken root in Andrew's consciousness, mingling with his own unbearable memories. The nightmares intensify. That very night, scarcely had Andrew fallen asleep when it began. He saw himself standing upon the shore, ankle deep in icy water. The waves did not merely crash against the beach. They whispered his name, melding with voices from his past that he so desperately sought to silence. He felt an invisible force pulling him downward into the cold, black abyss. He awoke in a cold sweat, his heart pounding like a trapped bird. In the nights that followed, the dreams became more vivid. They rolled over him like a heavy wave, enveloping him in a leaden shroud. He saw indistinct, blurred faces floating beneath the water, faces resembling long-forgotten but terrible memories. Among them, in the murky depths, flickered the face of a child that called to him. This call penetrated to the very core of his being, and he felt himself being drawn, slowly but inexorably, into the cold, endless abyss. The electricity failed with increasing frequency. The radio worked with interference, transmitting only fragments of news about the mounting storms. The world around them seemed to contract, surrendering itself to the elements. Andrew noticed that he had altogether ceased to sleep properly. The nightmares did not merely tire him, they drained him, sapping his strength. Upon waking, he felt as weary as he had been the evening before, as though suffering from a heavy hangover, his mind full of fog. Reality distorts. The whispers that had initially existed only in dreams now pursued him during the day. He heard them in the howling wind, in the crash of waves, in the creaking of the house's wooden walls. This was not mere echo, but a persistent, enticing voice that called to him, promising oblivion and release from the thoughts that tormented him. Strange things began to occur in the village. Fishermen spoke of inexplicable lights in the depths, of strange whirlpools that appeared and vanished without cause. People saw silhouettes in the water, vast shadows gliding beneath the frozen surface. The waves seemed to curl into incomprehensible, ominous patterns, and even the scent of the sea had changed, becoming sharper, more putrid. One day, while browsing the living room bookshelf, Andrew discovered a weathered, tattered diary that had belonged to Lydia's missing husband. The yellowed pages were covered in uneven handwriting, and the final entries were nearly illegible. Among them, Andrew found descriptions that made his blood run cold. Voices from the water. They whisper my name. Grasping hands. Green eyes in the depths. This was the same as what he had dreamed. The same as what he heard during the day. The diary ended abruptly, as though the author had been interrupted mid-sentence. The revelation, call of the depths. Andrew understood. His dreams were not merely dreams, but prophetic visions foretelling something terrible. This was a summons. The incomprehensible entity, the breathing beneath the waters, which legend claimed only the doomed could hear, had chosen him. It wanted him to become part of the depths, to join those who had dissolved in the cold embrace of the ocean. His own past, his guilt, which he had tried to drown in flight, now resonated with this ancient call, amplifying it, making it inescapable. He saw not merely the sea, but infinity, where time and space dissolved into chaos. And this spirit of the sea, this chaos, drew him to itself. He somehow remembered how old fishermen hung charms made from enormous shells on their boats to ward off evil spirits. But Andrew knew that from this spirit there was no escape. It was already within him. Finale. The eternal curse. The following morning, when the wind had somewhat abated and dim glimmers of dawn began to pierce the dense fog, Andrew Harper departed the fishing village. He left Lydia and Jacob, left their quiet life, which he had unwittingly disturbed. Andrew fled the village, but he could not escape himself. He had changed madness, it seemed, had taken residence in his head. And this was noticeable, the motel proprietor, at whose establishment he stopped during his flight, nodding at Andrew's mutterings, asked no unnecessary questions. The whispers returned. At first, he heard them only at night, in the silence of the motel, in the creaking of branches beyond the window. Then, during the day, in the rumble of cars, in the noise of crowds. This was the breathing beneath the waters, relentless, eternal. He knew it would continue for the remainder of his life, slowly, inexorably, day after day. Now, he knew that those who heard the whispers from the water in their dreams, and then continued to hear them on the shore, in their own heads, had been chosen. Not merely by the ocean, but by some entity dwelling in its fathomless depths. And for him, the path into those depths was merely a matter of time. With each glance at the raging sea, he would perceive shadows with burning eyes, filled with malice toward all things upon the land.